Hey there, in this video we're going to be discussing what is easily one of the most famous pieces ever written for piano, the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata. We're going to be discussing a very specific section that proves to be really challenging for many students that I teach, and it's a section that involves a chord called a fully diminished seventh chord. So strap in, we're going to be discussing a little Beethoven. Okay, for those of you who have a copy of the score in front of you, I'm going to be playing measures 32 through 37. I'm going to go ahead and go through that real quick so we know what we're talking about. Okay, I had mentioned that we're going to be using this piece of music to discuss a fully diminished seventh chord. So let's break that down first. If we take a look at the keyboard within an octave, if I count all the white and black keys, so I'm going to go from C until I repeat another C. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So what we're going to do is just show you how there's actually only 3 of these chords available throughout music. A fully diminished seventh chord is a combination of 4 notes that are all separated by 3 half steps. A half step is just moving from one note to the very next note, whether that's a white or black key. So if I go up in increments of 3 half steps, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So this is my first fully diminished seventh chord. And because I mentioned earlier that there's only 12 notes available, if I divide 12 by 4, I get 3. So what I mean, the reason that I did 12 by 4 is that if I'm going up in 3 half steps, by the time I get to the third motion of doing that, I'm actually repeating the chord I was playing at the beginning. So I'll repeat that because I said that kind of fast. So this combination of notes, if I go up in increments of 3 half steps, will go on indefinitely in either direction, repeating all the same 4 notes. Because there's only 12 notes possible, and I'm moving in groupings of 3 half steps, that is. So if I keep doing that, this chord will go on forever in either direction. So if I just move this whole bit of notes separated by 3 half steps up by 1 half step, I have an entirely new fully diminished seventh chord. If I do it one more time, there's one more. But if I do it one more time, I will have gone up 3 half steps from the beginning, and I'm back at my first chord. So there's only 3 of these possible. You could spell them differently, but technically there's only 3 of them available. So in the section that I was referring to that went like this, Beethoven actually, this is a really clever section because he uses this bass note, this G sharp on the bottom, as an indicator of where he wants those diminished sevenths to go. I'll explain that. So these diminished sevenths, the way that they work, all 4 of these notes can resolve anywhere possible. That's just the way these chords work. They basically can move wherever we want them to move. So when he has this G sharp ringing out on the bottom, it's indicating to us where these chords want to go. So cleverly, he uses the 2 fully diminished seventh chords that don't have a G sharp in them. So the first one, this one, the G sharp is right here. The second one occurs 2 measures later, and it's this one. And the G sharp from the bottom is right here. So really, he's just toying around with the listener, trying to get that note to resolve to here. And what's interesting is in between those two fully diminished seventh chords, he goes to a chord that has the G sharp in it. He goes to a C sharp minor. But again, this is really clever because even though the chord has a G sharp in it, it's not a G sharp chord, so it doesn't feel like it's finalized. So in the first one, when he plays this, even though that note exists in the chord, it doesn't feel like we've landed where we want to go. That doesn't happen until the end when we're up here. Right here. That's the chord that we wanted to go to. But even then, we don't land on the G sharp. It's just this constant motion somewhere else. That's just how this whole piece works. We don't really feel like we've finalized on something really until the end. So the fully diminished seventh chord that we're using in the beginning is here. The second one is here. Now, I mentioned before that this is an area that many of my students have struggled with in the past to read through. And really the reason is because we're trying to sight read it. This is where music theory comes into play and being really handy, because there's actually a pattern that's going on over all of these measures. So if I know what chords I'm playing, I can very easily go through it. But if I'm just sight reading this, it's very weird. And I'll explain that. Unfortunately for fully diminished seventh chords, we end up inevitably having to spell notes in ways that are a little less practical. I'll explain. So in the past, we've had videos talking about seventh chords, and we've talked about how alphabetically notes go together. So for instance, if I take C, and I wanted to create a chord off of it, I need to go up in what you call alphabetical thirds. So if this is C, C is 1, my 3 is C, D, E, my 5 is G, and then my 7 is B. So I'm going to spell it C, E, G, B. Now remember that, C, E, G, B. Now, if I wanted to have a fully diminished seventh chord built off of C, it would be this. Now, remember, we were talking about C, E, G, B. So if I turn that into a fully diminished seventh chord, I still need to spell it. If I want it to be a C fully diminished seventh chord, I still have to spell it C, E, G, B. But the chord looks like this. So if I'm still spelling it C, E, G, B, I have C, E flat, G flat, but whoa. This is what we would spell as a B double flat. So in this piece, he actually is spelling one of the fully diminished seventh chords, this one. What's really confusing about this is that he's actually spelled it as an F double sharp fully diminished 7. This is just absurd. So that means that this, even though that looks like a G, is spelled in the music as an F double sharp. So this is typically why a student is going to have a really hard time reading this, because there's a lot to keep track of in terms of accidentals. Accidentals are written in sharps and flats. So a double sharp is not a friendly thing to look at, but if I know what chord I'm playing, then I don't really have to worry about sight reading it. I just see the pattern. So for you teachers out there that are teaching this piece, you may consider showing the pattern in chords rather than just sight reading the notes. Now, one last little point that I want to make about this is just how clever Beethoven is with this section and why it works. So I'm going to play this with the fully diminished 7 chord that he didn't use. So this is the same pattern, but that's with the only other fully diminished 7th chord he didn't choose. I'm going to add it into the whole thing, and we'll see how it changes the feel. I kind of like the fact that, one, he didn't choose it, and it also didn't sound bad. These fully diminished 7th chords are just so clever to me because you can go wherever you want with them. You can use a note that's included in the chord to create another chord out of it, like if I wanted to do, or even if I wanted to go to F major. Or, like what he does, he takes this chord, and where we're really wanting that to go is right there. Actually, technically, he wanted that to go to a major, so let's try that again. But these fully diminished 7th chords, if you're writing music, you should really test out these chords. They're extremely versatile. Extremely versatile. Well, I hope this video is informative, if not interesting. Again, if you want to follow along to the video you just watched, you should just get a copy of the score and look at it. Measures 32 through 37. Just like any video, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.